There are numerous laugh-out-loud moments in Saltburn, Emerald Fennell's darkly comic and voyeuristic exploration of the British aristocracy being released on Friday by Amazon MGM Studios. Despite the hugely impressive efforts of Rosamund Pike and Richard E. Grant, however, most don't belong to the lead cast, but to Paul Rhys. As Duncan, the imperious and terrifying Butler, the Welsh actor silently steals scenes from under the toffee noses of both those he dutifully serves at the Saltburn mansion, including Pike, Grant, Jacob Elordi and Alison Oliver. And the lower-class interloper he's keeping a beady eye on Barry Keoghan, each time he appears with hilariously puff-faced magnificence. And it's a face that crops up again in another starry title landing late in the awards season corridor. In Ridley Scott's much-anticipated biopic Napoleon, out November 22nd via Apple Original Films and Sony Pictures, Rhys plays Talleyrand, the crafty club-footed diplomat who served as the French commander's political right-hand man as he swept across Europe and, later, betrayed him. For Rhys, it's a somewhat unusual experience to have such high-profile Hollywood features back-to-back. With much of his better-known work on stage, he earned an Olivier nomination in 1997 for his performance in a production in King Lear. But it's one he's fully embracing. With Emerald, I would have done practically anything, much less than Duncan, to be in her film. And with Ridley, who doesn't want that experience, he's one of the greats, he tells The Hollywood Reporter. Between these two, you've got these bookends of British brilliance. It's an experience the 59-year-old admits could have come much sooner, had he only followed his dear friend Tim Roth's advice after their big-screen breaks back in 1990. Roth used Robert Altman's critically lauded Vincent van Gogh biopic Vincent and Theo as his springboard to stardom, Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction soon following. But despite Roth urging Rhys, who played his on-screen brother Theo van Gogh, to never go back to the UK, Rhys says he wasn't particularly interested in all the attention they were getting in Hollywood. There have been some early hopeful Oscar conversations, and the opportunities suddenly being found at their feet. Tim would say, Bridget Fonda's having a pool party this afternoon, we've got to go. But I'd be like, I haven't finished this book yet. I'll stay here, he recalls, adding that he considered himself a theater actor who did film, and that he had to head home to continue working. So at the peak of film, I went back to the National Theatre for 3 years. Rhys' career on stage blossomed. Highlights, alongside King Lear, include playing Hamlet at the Old Vic and winning a Critics' Circle Award for Measure, alongside a growing assortment of TV work, including parts in Luther, Victoria, and, most recently, A Discovery of Witches. And he continued to get film roles. Soon after Vincent and Theo, and in another famous sibling performance, he plays Sidney Chaplin to Robert Downey Jr. as Charlie in Richard Attenborough's 1992 biopic Chaplin. And he'd later appear in Alan Bennett's 102 Boulevard Houseman and opposite Peter O'Toole in Rebecca's Daughters. And then every time there'd be a new shot, I'd be straight back to the theater and fucking it up, he says. If I could go back to all that opportunity, I don't know if it would be so wise to leave it and do theater all the time. But you live by your choices. But now, more than 30 years after his unexploited break with Roth and Altman, Rhys is back in Hollywood, literally. He flew over to LA for the recent, post-strike premiere of Saltburn, and he says the part almost came to him as if it were willed by fate. Having seen Fennell's Oscar-winning debut Promising Young Woman while on a flight, he came off the plane wondering how he'd ever get to meet the fast-rising filmmaker, let alone work with her. And a week later this offer came in, Rhys recalls. However, the offer to play Duncan came with a warning from his agent that, for actors, it's the beginning of the end when you're doing the old Butler. He was undeterred, and Saltburn proved to be one of the best experiences of his working life. I loved every second of filming it, he says, explaining that he actually lived in the vast stately home where much of Saltburn was shot, almost as a form of method acting to truly embody the Butler. I had Duncan's room in the actual house. Despite coming from a very working-class background himself, Rhys says he's become fine-tuned to playing those from the upper echelons of society, including Beethoven or Talleyrand or Hamlet or just some toff. This put him in good stead to step into the fiercely polished brogues of Duncan, who he says didn't arrive fully formed, with Fennell allowing for character development and improvisation to build on her own carefully constructed ideas for him.